Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast with Benji Naesen. This is our Ronde van Vlaanderen recap men's race. If you're watching on YouTube, and there's a women's race separately on YouTube, all together on the podcast players, if that's where you prefer to listen. This parcours, it got released very late for the Tour of Flanders, but it's the same old 254 Ks from Antwerp to Oudenaarde. It's got the climbs we know and love, Oude Kwaremont, Paardenberg, Tijnberg, etc. The last climb or collection of climbs is the Kwaremont and Paardenberg with about 13, 14 Ks to go. Strong teams, favourites you'd expect, Alaphilippe, Wout van Aert, Mathieu van der Poel for the men's race, which we'll do first, and we're going to recap it right now. Before we get into it, I want to mention our show partner, Le Col. They've just announced their collaboration with Ambassador Johan Museeuw. Some would argue knows more about winning Tour of Flanders races than Benji and I. I'd say maybe differently, but yeah, jokes aside, if you want to check out that new kit drop they're doing in collaboration with Johan Museeuw, the link is down below, or you can see it on their Instagram. But Benji, why don't you kick us off with what happened on the live feed with 6 hours of racing to go when only you, I, and some other degenerates were watching?
Yes, we had, I woke up and just dragged myself to the couch, and then I started watching the Tour of Flanders, and what I saw was a dangerous breakaway, actually. A bit dangerous in the sense that I do see some riders that have been in the final of one of these cobble races before. Yellow Alliance for Cofidis was part of it, but also Bissiger, the prologue specialist that we've recently seen develop in that. But also, we've seen last year that he can do cobble, so I was like, ooh, he's going to be the last survivor for the breakaway. And eventually, we won't talk about it yet, but that breakaway reached up to a good 12 to 13 minutes.
Yep.
And obviously, that's quite a lot, but it's also very early in the race, so we were still thinking this break is going to be caught at some point. But I did have in mind, if these riders have 13 minutes now, and you've got the pissing breaks of the peloton in the meanwhile and so forth, then you're going to come into a situation where the last survivors of these might end up being in the front elite group by the end of this race. So I was thinking about that with
like
Bissiger
Matthew
in mind
Heyman in
myself.
2016 Roubaix.
Yes, Walleyes as well in Roubaix. 2 years ago, the one where Sagan won, I think.
2018.
I don't even know anymore. 2018, yes. Then next up, we had quite a few events in the peloton.
DSM and Astana had missed it. That's what's happened behind. They missed the break. Astana of the worst classics team in World Tour. So they were trying to get in to the break. And Koenig and Bora, despite what Benji said, and I agree with what he said, they were largely happy with the breakaway formation, and they certainly didn't want more riders to get into it. So they were blocking, had everyone spread out across the front. Alpecin were blocking, Tim de Klerk was stopping Astana coming up the gutter, 2:47 Ks to go. They were remonstrating with the Astana riders, saying, don't you dare try and bridge across. Then Fedorov for Astana attacked. He was marked by, how do you pronounce his name, Benji? Vergeire for Alpecin?
Vergaarde. Otto
Vergaarde. Otto Vergaarde for Alpecin. Worker for Mathieu van der Poel in the early Ks, marked by him. They'd been arguing before, and then a weird occurrence happened. He braked Fedorov, or pulled off, and then started braking, it seemed, and then Vergaarde threw his whole body into him, almost unannounced, nearly knocked him off his bike, nearly caught a crash in front of Perstelberger, the Bora rider, who was like, what the hell are you guys doing? And both were eventually disqualified because then Fedorov tried to throw back into him. We'll talk more about the DSQ probably at the end of the pod because it doesn't really fit in with the rest of the race. But yeah, you agree with the DSQ, right, Benji?
Yes, we'll talk about it later, but I agree with that DSQ. But the one I don't agree with is something that happened a bit later in the race, and that's, Michael Scher had been having a pretty bad day already. Yeah. I think twice he had to change bike. The second time, his bike was still not in order, and while he was trying to get his second bike replaced, he was going back to the car, and he took his bottle and he threw it a bit in frustration, but I don't think that really had anything to do with it, towards a few spectators that were by the side
directly
of the road.
To them.
Well, yeah, directly to them. And I think you could 5 kilometers to 10 kilometers later, we heard the news that Michael Scher was taken out of the race for throwing a bottle at a spectator, thanks to the new rules that were just put in April 1st. Yesterday in the GP in the Rhine, we had a similar case, but we'll go into this and give our opinions on this also after the race recap, because I think we're pretty opinionated about all of this.
Well, he was DSQ'd, to be clear, for littering, not for like throwing it at a spectator. But their new rules.
Important.
There was a Twitter beef. A lot of people talking about it afterwards. Again, this is the most exciting thing that happened in the first 160 Ks. But I mean, we watched it and we got stuff to talk about later. But didn't really change anything to do with the race. Jumbo-Visma with Eduardo Affini were keeping the break in check. Alpecin and De Koning were letting them do that. Maybe surprising, but what was more surprising was with 95 Ks to go, maybe even before then, De Koning were assembling at the front at the view of the climbs. Molenberg, 95, they pushed hard. What was the climb they did in E3, Benji, where they split it?
I think that was the Tyenberg that they used in E3, but this was a different one.
Who was
it? Yes, same strategy. I think Osgren was in third wheel. I don't know. I think it was Van Lerbergen and Ballerini who were the first two of the train.
No Stibar.
And they pushed really hard. Exactly. Stibar is not here because of a heart surgery he had. He could start from the doctors, but he decided not to, just in case. Good decision. Anyway, that move on the Molenberg did split things up for quite a bit. So the De Koning riders were with the upper hand again. Same story as E3, but the group was too large. And if the group is that large and it's so long until the next climb, because basically on paper the race would open up at either the Canarieberg or the Oude Quaremont with 60 to 70k to go. So attacking with 95 to go is like 30 kilometers distance towards that. It's hard to keep that up, and they decided not really to do so. But it also got decapitated a bit later on because they had that group. And what I noticed in that group, though, before we get to the following steps, is that the second that happened on the Molenberg, Van Aert had no teammates in the first section of the group. And there was a gap, and then there were the teammates of Van Aert. Same story with Van der Poel, who had one teammate, I think Vermeersch, in that group. So when shit hit the fan, they were basically almost isolated already. And that's a thing that I didn't want to see so early on, group. Because that...
we're talking group of 50 plus. When it came back together after the Molenberg. It's not like it was super selective. The race had been really easy up to that point, apart from the battle for positioning going into it. And Jumbo-Visma had used Nathan van Hooijdonk, the guy they'd used to police moves late in Gent-Wevelgem, to close down attacks in the first 2 hours, 3 hours of the race, and he was gone. And Jumbo had no further teammates really up to that point. Maybe Ankhorn, I'm not sure. But I was really surprised they used Van Hooijdonk early. I thought they would have been reserving him the way Alpecin kind of tried to do with Gianni Vermeersch to stay in G2, G3 at worst. But yeah, nothing really happened. All came back together. Massive group. No favourites dropped. Maybe Mads Pedersen was dropping at this point, or maybe a little bit later. He dropped with like 60, 70 Ks to go. They go to the Canarieberg. Again, nothing really happened. MVDP and Alpecin were blocking, I think. And then 63 Ks to go, or just over. Soren Kragh Andersen attacked, trying to do a Dylan van Baarle, I think, Benji. You surprised no one went with him?
Yep. I'm surprised that nobody directly went with him, but we saw a bit later at the end of the Canarieberg that some attacks from the back started happening. And all of those groups actually included Ankhorn, one of those Jumbo riders, because after the initial attack of the Koning on the Molenberg, the groups all came together a bit and we had more Jumbo teammates. So here they could try stuff again, but I think that was also kind of the last time we saw a teammate of Jumbo-Visma there. So I don't know. We had at E3 a situation where the teammates of Wout were not really that proper until he was having that puncture and he got back to the second group. So they didn't make the first group. And then that brought the entire situation differently and that group had to come back. And in Gent-Wevelgem, we had two people that made the echelon and the rest of the team was not really shown too much. And they were celebrating that their team was very strong at Gent-Wevelgem because Van Hooijdonk made the split. But I didn't really agree with that because it was only one teammate. So that doesn't really entitle a team being very, very strong. That in titles, one rider that was overperforming in one race. And today we saw that it indeed was the case, because today there were some moves where the Jumbo riders were there. They were in the groups behind, and they were unable to help him when it really mattered in the final situation. And well, that's kind of important sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a flatter section now, not so hard before the next collection of climbs, Alta Quadmont and the Paterberg with 54 kilometers to go. MVDP looks strong on the Quadmont. But it all stayed together again. They just stayed at the front. All the favourites are there. There was crashes. I can't remember. Stefan Kung attacked Benji, whether it was on the Quadmont. I think Seneschal might have clipped him, but didn't seem to be too badly hurt. There were a lot of crashes in the lead up to these climbs, or just through the feed zones. A lot of people crashing. Niels Eckhoff, hard crash today. Why do you think there were all those crashes, Benji, or is it the same as always? It's just people trying to fight for a limited amount of space.
Yeah, that's one part of it. I think that the major crash was before Eekhoff, where we saw basically half the team of the Koenig down. Asgreen, Ballerini, de Klerk all hit the ground. Asgreen actually had to solo back for quite a while to the peloton group, to the elite group, before they went to the Oude Quademont. And this is all because all these teams are hearing in their ears from the DS, get to the front, the Oude Quademont is coming, gotta watch out, gotta be in the first wheel, gotta be in the first position, good positioning before that climb. And that's why they keep on pushing, and it gets them nervous. And in every corner, people start to get nervous, and sometimes there's a shoulder barge in between. And eventually, yeah, it causes crashes because everybody wants to be in the same position, and you can't all be in that same position. And unfortunately, yeah, it didn't look too good for Alpecin either, because they lost two riders there. DNF for, I think, Dillier and somebody else, but I don't know who. Riesebeek, yes. And yeah, de Koenig and Alpecin weaker after that moment, but they all had to come back from that. Alpecin couldn't with those two riders, but de Koenig tried to come back with both Asgreen and Ballerini. I think de Klerk was basically done with his work anyway, so for him, only the crash can have caused hurt, but towards the team, I don't think that would have changed too much from that point. But yeah, Oude Quademont, what happened there?
Just a show of strength from MVDP, and I think the race really kicked off on the Paterberg. MVDP and Asgreen tried to attack. There was a group with Alaphilippe and Pidcock, which then countered. Pidcock looked really good early. He'd gone clear, I think, with Marco Haller, and they dropped a few of the quick-step riders. Pidcock had re-attacked out of that group. They'd caught Bissiger at this point, who's working with that group. Bahrain looking really strong in the latter third of this race. Wout van Aert is caught behind a couple of times, having to bridge back to move from Asgreen and Pidcock and Alaphilippe attacking. He has to close these all down himself. And then before the Tyenberg, which we're now getting into the last, I think, 40 kilometers of this race, with 40 Ks to go, Tyenberg, Haller attacks early, Dylan Van Baal style. He knows he's probably going to get dropped if MVVP attacks there. Tyenberg, you've got a group still large behind. You've got GVA there. I think the main riders that have been dropped at this point with 40 Ks to go, all looking in big difficulty and no chance of winning, were Sagan and Michael Matthews, and Christoph were nowhere to be seen. But you still have Wout van Aert and MVDP there. Asgreen went again on the Tyenberg, followed by MVDP, who I think then countered, but we didn't see that cut away. And then he was followed by Wout van Aert, Alaphilippe, and Dylan turns. They'd caught, eventually, Marco Haller. And so we have this group, and it's got the two $4 favourites, Wout van Aert and MVDP, 1 and 2 last year. It's got two quick-step riders, their two best riders, winner of E3, Asgreen, and their favourite for the day, Alaphilippe, and two Bahrain riders, Turns and Marco Haller. Turns didn't have a good year last year. And so we're thinking, who works? And the answer is they all mostly worked except Bahrain, who were complete underdogs, and they helped here and there. But they were like, well, Quickstep, you got two guys, and MVP and Wout van Aert, we're not going to beat you in a sprint. So I think they hampered it a little bit because that group had a 20-second gap, but Turgis was able to bridge from the group behind, from Total Direct Energy. We were hyping him on the preview. What do you think about Turgis today, Benji? May as well plug him before the finale. Surely someone's got to sign him on World Tour next year.
Yeah, I think Turgis was really strong
Yeah.
today, and I think we mentioned that he could be because he was also looking very strong on the Unbeatable game. Just missed the split, and today he also missed the split. So it seems like he's good at a relatively proper pace, but when it comes to the real attacks on the cobble sections or hills, he's just a tiny bit short to follow. So he has to try and benefit from the spaces in between to try and cover these attacks and try and launch back towards those groups. And today he did exactly the same thing. He used an opportunity where the front group was working together, but not at a top pace, while the second group was relatively close. He made that move, and eventually he came back towards the front, and he actually made the split, which is crazy. He made that bridge. But that brings us to the next moment. Then this is a moment where I kind of doubted whether what was happening was a good idea, and this is the same group at the front: Asgreen, Wout van Aert, Van der Poel, the two Bahrain riders, and Alaphilippe and Turgis.
I should say
And
G2
what happened there was
first. G2 was
yeah,
Sturven,
okay,
Greg van Avermaet behind, as well as Pidcock, Dylan Van Baal. Van Baal was very strong. I think Ineos might have made a mistake not attacking with him early. They were at 25 and had brought it from 30 to 20, went out to 25 again. They did the Kreuzberg, not a threatening climb, and that's where we get to the moment Benji's referring to, a false flat section with just over, I think, 24 Ks to go before the Kwaremont and Paderberg for the last time.
yes, and Asgreen was sitting in, I think, third wheel or something, or fourth wheel actually, and he decided to go on the attack on the left side of a wide road. And we saw that Van Aert was doubting for like 1 or 2 seconds and then decided, yeah, I need to jump on that because, well, otherwise it's going to be E3 all over again. So he jumps on that. Van der Poel jumps on his wheel. We see that Alaphilippe stays in the wheel of a Bahrain rider. I don't think if it was Haller or Turns, I don't know, but one of the two. Another Bahrain rider was in the wheel of Alaphilippe.
It was Turgis trying to close.
He was also in that.
Turgis was taking a bid on. Right at he just bridged these guys, massive bridge, 20-second gap on his own, and then he was trying to take a bid on at the moment Alaphilippe let the wheel of Asgreen go and dropped the bid on as well to add insult to injury, and then Bahrain refused to pull and Alaphilippe refused to pull. But at that moment, Benji, Asgreen, Wout van Aert, MVP going up the road, did you think, oh shit, Quickstep have played themselves here?
Yeah, I think so as well. I think that I was thinking that, and also I noticed that the Koenig was clearly thinking that as well. My opinion of that was that Asgreen from that group was attacking, and the fact that Alaphilippe did not respond to both Van der Poel and Van Aert caused them to lose one of their riders while they had the upper hand in riders, which is not a great idea attacking from this far out before the climbs to make that happen. If you want to do something like this, it's better off to do it after the climbs happen, because then you've got a better option of it succeeding, because then people are going to look at each other more. But if it's so early in the race, just before the hills, and like just before the Oude Kwaremont, then it's not going to work, because everybody wants to be in that front group once they hit the Oude Kwaremont. And otherwise, I didn't really get what Asgreen was trying there. And
he seemed unsure.
It was noticeable that, afterwards, surely, because he started pacing and then stopped pacing and then started pacing again. So they were doubting as well whether it was a good idea.
I think they were trying to figure out how Alaphilippe was going. His group had been subsumed at that point going into the base of the Oude Kwaremont with 19 Ks to go. That second group was coming back to the Sturven, Dylan Van Baal group behind, and Greg Van Avermaet in that group. So the three go into the Oude Kwaremont, Asgreen helping here and there, the big two, of course, working together, and Van der Poel attacked really hard, only bridged to by Casper Asgreen. Asgreen would go into these climbs, trying to go first wheel at the base, and then set as high a pace as possible for himself, rather than trying to do any massive explosion, MVDP would wait until the steepest parts of every climb, and then you know the rules: thermonuclear attack or biblical attack, particularly the one to come. Or no, the Quarmont one was the strongest. I think Van Aert dropped, and he was going backwards. He was almost zigzagging at that point, and Askren was just able to close it back just over the crest of these climbs. So strong, just like an E3. And so we had 15 Ks to go, 13-second gap, just made pretty much from the climb on Wout van Aert. Just the Paterberg left. Got Askren with MVDP. Askren, winner of E3, Kern of Brussels Kern last year, second in Flanders 2019. MVDP needs no introduction. Alaphilippe has been caught by the Seneschal. He's got one teammate behind, Seneschal, Sturven, Van Avermaet, Wout van Aert somewhere in the middle, and then Paterberg, MVDP. Did he try on the climb, Benji, to attack?
I think he tried. But we noticed already on the second time, no, the first time we went over the Paterberg, that Asgreen was really strong on that one.
Crazy.
And I was really scared. I was thinking this would be nice if, for example, Van der Poel has like 10 seconds on Asgreen at the top, because then we've got this chasing scene from the top of the Paterberg to the line. That would be amazing. But Asgreen was just too strong, because Van der Poel was on the side of the road, always in that tiny little gutter next to the cobble sections, trying to abuse that to get to the front. It's so funny to see, because I bet he just spends more energy thinking about trying to get in that fine line.
He's off balance
and actually doing it on the cobbles. Yeah,
and Askren's just on the crown of the road, plugging away at his pace. And I think we saw Van Aert come up. It was a long shot over the top of the Paterberg. You can see all the way down the climb. Van Aert had closed before the Paterberg, maybe 5 or 6 seconds, and then they put a much bigger gap into him, and he was gone. He was zigzagging on the Paterberg, and he eventually got caught over the crest by the Greg Van Avermaet, Seneschal, Alaphilippe, Van Baal group. Turgis back in that group too, working a lot. And then we had the flat run into the finish. 12 Ks, I think 25 seconds, fluctuated between 23 and 31 seconds. The group behind cooperating really well, Sturven and Turgis. Seneschal and Vermeersch sitting at the back, not working, but Seneschal not blocking. Alaphilippe had actually been dropped as well, so it was all for Seneschal. When did you think, if at all, Benji, Askren would stop cooperating with MVDP? Because I thought this is really difficult for Quick-Step. They've got a guy who's on paper not as quick as MVDP, and a flat run in with not too much technicality to go.
The thing that I was thinking was that at like 7 or 6 kilometers to go, I was thinking about the qualities of Asgreen in the sprint. I recall him doing decent in sprints in the past, in the same way that Lampard or Van Marke can do decent in a top 5 or top 10 of a sprint sometimes. Against Van der Poel, it's very difficult. We know that last year Van der Poel started to slow down the tempo in the last 500 meters of the sprint to make sure that Van Aert had to use, acceleration, which Van der Poel is better to do the sprint. And I was thinking that Asgreen, in the similar situation, one should not attack, because I think that's just, you're losing the race if you attack at that point in a 1v1 situation. And he needs to try and launch it earlier and not wait as long in the sprint and not let Van der Poel lower that tempo a bit. But a lot of people were mentioning on social media already, stop working Asgreen with 5 kilometers to go, but the group behind was on 23 seconds at a certain point then. So I was like, perhaps keep on riding, keep on pacing until 2 to 1.5k to go, then sit in the wheel of Van der Poel, because then you're going to have like a 25-second gap with 2 kilometers to go. Van der Poel, knowing him, he's going to stay at the front, and he's always going to lead in the sprint because he knows he's got a better sprint, or he thinks he's got a better sprint in a proper sprint against Asgreen. After a 250-kilometer race, that can be very different. I was rooting for Asgreen. I thought he was going to take it, and the sprint started.
Yeah.
And it was in a very similar fashion as last year, where Van der Poel was trying to slow the tempo. But Asgreen, it seemed like the tempo was still relatively high into the last 300 meters compared to last year. And I was thinking 300 meters, perhaps go already. And he just kept on his pedals. He kept on his pedals until 250. And I think he only went at 225 or so,
Yes.
right?
225. Asgreen, the minute he twitches, MVP kicks, big initial kick, but no gap opened up on Asgreen, who wasn't on his wheel. And that was the first tell that normally, if MVDP from a standing start kicks really hard with no one in his draft, Asgreen to his side, you'd expect a gap to open up. It didn't. Asgreen stayed right next to him, inching closer, gets level his shoulder with MVDP's back wheel, and then MVDP sat down as the camera changed to front on. That was because Asgreen was coming past him at 75 to go. MVDP knew he couldn't win. Asgreen, the long 15-second plus sprint out of the saddle. You never know what can happen at the end of a 255k hard cobble classic, and Asgreen beat MVDP in the sprint easily, despite me saying, why are you working for so long? Because the gap had gone out from 20 seconds to 35 seconds with 5Ks to go. Asgreen had kept working. The big tell was how strong he was all down the climbs. MVDP could gap him initially, maybe if he wasn't right on the wheel, but Asgreen brought him back with relative ease. We aren't talking a 5-minute bridge, a 3-minute bridge. It's like, no, 15 seconds, 10 seconds, and he was back to the wheel of MVDP. Always stronger than Wout van Aert. The group behind had stopped cooperating from about 5Ks to go. The closest they brought that gap down to was about 20 seconds. Then Greg Van Avermaet, sensing the podium beckoning, attacked out of that group, marked only by Jasper Stuyven. And so those two went clear, fought it out for third, and Greg Van Avermaet won that battle, but not the war. So here's the final top 10. Asgreen first, Mathieu van der Poel second, Greg Van Avermaet third, Jasper Stuyven fourth, Sepp van Mark, Wout van Aert, Yanni Vermeersch seventh, Seneschal, Turgis, and Van Baal. I think Turgis, he's got to be my man of the day outside of the top two. If he'd ridden selfishly, he could have got third. But he rode for the win today. He rode to bring back the front two on his own multiple times, and it cost him the podium spot. But I hope World Tour teams are watching if that's what he wants, because he needs to be on a top-tier cobbled squad. But yeah, you expected it, Benji, that outcome, or you thought it was more likely, that sprint outcome at the end, than people thought?
I think it was possible. I'm not gonna say that I knew Asgreen was going to win, but I thought it was possible. I put my money where my mouth is, and eventually it led out to be a good thing, because it ended up playing out as I hoped it would in the end. I think that when it comes to Asgreen, you can never underestimate him. The last sprint he won was in Tour of California, his first year, I think, as a pro, or second year as a pro. And he did that against TJ Van Garderen. So it's not exactly the one where you can define if you've got a good sprint or not. But ever since then, he's been a decent sprinter. He's been a good time trialist. He's been a great cobbler. And he's so good overall. And that allows for a rider to be good at the end of these races, these rough races. If you're the strongest on a day like this, where Van der Poel, honestly, looked good, but not like Strade Bianche at all, then I believe he got an opportunity, and he took it home.
I disagree.
I think he also crashed, Asgreen.
Yeah, true. I think MVDP looked the same as Strade. If the difference is, Benji, if you think they had to climb to Siena at the finish of Flanders, I still think he wins and beats Asgreen. And I don't think, I think it's just a different parcours. And I think the rule we need to remember, and with people forget it quickly, even though it happened last year, the underdog on paper in a head-to-head sprint at the end of a monument or a hard cobble classic is always undervalued and underrated. MVP last year, I think people favoured Wout for the sprint. I certainly did, favoured Wout. And today, I probably favoured MVP not as highly as Wout last year, because I'm obviously a fanboy. But still, I was like, oh, surely Askren's going to sit on early. Why is he pulling? Why is he pulling? Why is he not attacking or trying something with 5Ks to go? But he backed himself. They maybe knew Alaphilippe didn't have it today. He didn't. That's the quick step mentality. Imagine Benji, and a lot of other teams might have done it. Maybe not with Askren, because he does have the cobbled. He just won A3, but a lot of other teams would be like, Alaphilippe's the leader. Sit on. Don't pull with MVP.
Yep.
And they get caught, and maybe someone else wins. Like, people were calling for it.
It could also have been, let's imagine that I'm criticizing the moment that Asgreen attacked because I believe that was not an idle moment.
I don't think Alaphilippe knew.
Two riders to one rider. But looking at it in hindsight, imagine if he doesn't make that move and they get over the last Paterberg with 4 riders. Van Aert, Van der Poel, Alaphilippe, and Asgreen. Who is the Koenig sprinting for? Alaphilippe on paper. And then they might have lost the race.
Yeah. Well, they probably would have attacked with Askren. And
yeah, probably. But
anyway, it's
it's a
elegant quick step. They've got the special name for Flanders. Elegant is a special glass window line, apparently, for De Koenig. Benji's pretending like he doesn't know, but it's clearly everyone in Belgium knows, or now they're supposed to. And other news for the race, I guess, would be Quickstep Wolfpack undefeated. We saw a statistic, 22% of monuments since like the year 2000 have been won by Quickstep or Pat Lefevre. So they know how to win races. Jumbo-Visma, I mean, they were asking for apologies from people such as ourselves who'd criticised the support for Wout van Aert after Gent-Wevelgem. That criticism was still correct. Like,
valid.
I mean, it's still a problem.
It's the same with Van der Poel positioning. Yeah. He was also saying that wasn't a problem, but
yeah,
it is. And it's the same thing for both. We saw today again that Van der Poel was at the back of a group when the climb happened, but Van Aert was in the wheel of Van der Poel, so it was not like he was doing too much better when it comes to that positioning. But in the end, I think that it was a wonderful race. I really enjoyed it. And
it's fantastic.
I'd like to talk about controversies now, because that's why I'm here.
No, I want to ask you something.
Oh, okay.
Do you think MVP is better than Wout van Aert as a classics rider in 2021 and 2020?
Yes. When it comes to 2020 RVV, I still don't know who would have won if Van Aert didn't crash and didn't have his chain off at the moment that Alaphilippe attacked. So it's very hard to say if that race would have been different.
Let me rephrase it.
I dare to
say
Let me
rephrase it.
Okay.
Do you think Wout looks the same, better, or worse, slightly worse than 2020 in terms of crazy level in the classics?
I believe he's not looking as good. I believe that we also saw it in E3 where that move was just suddenly gone, and in a 2020 Wout van Aert, we didn't really see that. We saw him dominating the races he rode, except for RVV, where he was also dominating it, but with someone together. I believe last year's RVV, we had a situation where Van der Poel was not in the form that he wanted to be in yet, I think. He was trying to build it up from those Italian classics that weren't good and tried to build up. And wasn't that his ideal form? While Van Aert was going down since the Tour de France slightly, and they both were relatively on the same level, but they all had a bit of a different area in which they were going. Van Aert was getting worse, and Van der Poel was building up form. And I think Van der Poel expected to start the season at a better form last year with those Italian classics, and didn't really reach the potential he wanted to be in, and Van Aert didn't really peak long enough to keep that going to dominate that RVV as well. So they were both very strong, but I don't think that was the strongest they could ever be. I think we saw them stronger, Van der Poel. Honestly, I still believe in Strade was better than today, despite the parkour. I think that he's just had a very long run right now, and it's kind of logical that someone who's been so good for a month straight, that he has to have a weekday someday. I still think that Ronde van Vlaanderen was just a bit weird. I think it was the sun that's probably bothering him on that
Yeah.
one. I don't think it was really related to proper bad legs after tiredness or something.
Okay.
But I still believe that today they also both weren't at their best level, and I think that is also why Asgreen had the opportunity of winning here.
Let-
But Asgreen, best race of a season and of
his
his
life.
life so far.
It's not like he did it through luck or
Yeah,
tactics. He was
strength from
straight up
Paterberg.
stronger than MVP in the final after having worked with him and closed him down the whole time. And he didn't even
Yes.
have his team. His team didn't close down moves for him. So, yeah, hats off to Asker. If you've enjoyed it all, got a Ko-Fi link if you want to support the podcast, or alternatively, a like on the YouTube channel or a review on your podcast players is all we need for your support. But we get that support in droves and we really appreciate it. See you next time. Ciao.